Lovely to have you all here. I'm Amanda. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. Very excited to do a really practical session today on differentiation. And all the work that we have done, all the work that we have seen, differentiation and personalization of learning has been one of the biggest, most interesting and impactful use cases of these tools. We know that they are new and that they're growing and they don't do everything we want. We were just complaining about their inability to format things correctly, but it is something in which we can see this ability to really have supercharge our lesson planning to better meet the needs of our students. And so, what always want to see, and thank you for those that are already getting started. This is your opportunity to get involved, not only with Brian and I, but with each other. So please make sure to say hello, where you're from, and also just to chat. So if you have resources, best practices, questions, their community in our chat is one of our most favorite things of this year. So please use that time wisely and these people that you have around you. And then lastly, we're actually going to be doing a significant amount of prompting today. So we have 7 new prompts that have been designed in collaboration with Brian around everything from a student-facing prompt around tutoring to a culturally responsive prompt, etc. So we love you to get involved. We'll be dropping in those prompts, but definitely have your ChatGPT or favorite AI program open because we'll be doing that pretty much for the entire session. Lastly, oh my gosh, it's almost the holidays. So we only have one left here. It does not mean that the AI Launchpad series is going away. I'm a crazy person. This is number 26. We do not plan on ending these webinars because we have such a lovely group and I get to keep having great guests like Brian. But our next one is with Tom Vander Ark, who is a good friend and really amazing thought leader. And we're going to be going deep and get ready for a pretty interesting, naughty conversation about durable skills of the future. What is the learner experience going forward? I promise it'll keep you on your toes. But today we're really going to be focusing on differentiation. And so we're going to do a little bit of level set in terms of what differentiation is and how it's changed. But we want to spend the most time actually showing you how to use generative AI, specifically with ChatGPT, to do this work. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian, who is going to give us our very common first answers, so your introduction and your first time using generative AI.
Okay, great. Wow, thanks so much, Amanda. My name is Brian. I'm a geek. I'm a self-proclaimed geek. For the last 25 years, I've had one foot solely in startups and working for VCs and startup centers and working with small companies, early stage companies, and emerging technology. And the other foot I've had in education. So I've been really interested in the skills gap, been really interested in how we can take, emerging and frontier technology and help all kinds of practitioners do their jobs better. And, I have a real soft spot in my heart for teachers. I think there's a lot of power and throughput to come from a frontier technology like generative AI. Very excited to be here and be part of this. The very first time that I used generative AI was for a demo because someone had texted me at work and said, "Hey, do you know much about this? Are you keeping up with it?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about it." This was probably like last January. And I have a theme song for each of the people I work with. So when they come on, I said, I just said, "Dan, Dan, you're just the man." So yeah, so I had ChatGPT come up with new theme songs for 3 people on my team, and it was a lot of fun, and it got people interested, and some people have new nicknames because of it. But it was really cool. We started using it in Anger very shortly after that to help out with creating deliverables and outlines for new courses, and we've really tried to do a lot of interesting things with ChatGPT and prompts, and hopefully today we'll get an opportunity to share some of that with you.
I love that. And I love the creativity. If you're a elementary school teacher out there watching us today, go create a theme song for your students. We know we love the viral, like fist bumps or, the different salutes, but getting AI to kind of have that fun with you is such a great idea. And I love that that was your first use case. I always find this is such a great example of what people first get, excited about. And so that kind of leads us today because you're talking about differentiation. Actually, you're differentiating the way that you work with the different people in your team and the way you approach them, the way you say hello to them, which is actually what we're going to talk about today. And so when we think about differentiation, we're not going to spend a lot of time, but it's been around. I was a teacher almost 20 years ago. Oh man, I back in the day, and we were talking about differentiation at that time, this ability to meet the needs of students at different levels within the same classroom. And it was really fascinating because this is, very early on in the technology roadmap of our schools. We did not have one-to-one devices, we did not have great connectivity. And we were expected to like create these spaces in which we were able to level instruction not only to the students' needs in terms of their skill levels, but also their interests. And one of the things that I got most excited about when I thought about this technology was that immediately it became clear to me how you could start to use this tool to start actually meeting the needs of your students. And so I'd love to like so Brian, I'd love to understand what you think has changed in their ability to differentiate based on ChatGPT and other generative AI tools.
Yeah, I think that it's really perfect timing because if you look at the climate and some of the challenges that we have in the classroom today, is we have more diverse classrooms than we've ever had. We have more children, more students on the spectrum. We have more cultural diversity than we've had, and this isn't something that's just in big city school districts now. It's all over the country. And I think teachers also have more responsibility in the classroom than they ever have. So they need partners, they need technology that will work with them and take the innate abilities that they have and help improve those and help introduce efficiencies. And I think that generative AI is unique in that it really doesn't take a lot of setup. It doesn't take a deep understanding of all the underpinning mathematics and AI. In fact, I think Amanda, you and I were talking yesterday or sometime this week about how the people that tend to do really well with this are very creative. They're people that are already master communicators and problem solvers. They're curious, they're judgmental, they're opinionated. They have all these great things. They're good storytellers. And I think bringing those to bear to task to generative AI is really going to have a massive throughput in education. And so I think that maybe early on, people who weren't technical were a bit intimidated and said, well, I don't want to get into this because I don't understand how it works. Trust us when you don't have to understand how it works. What you have to understand is how to have these conversations, how to really embrace the empirical method. You're going to try something, you're not going to get the response that you want. You're going to try something again, and then you learn. And another thing that Amanda and I were talking about before the session is I started on some prompts and got them to her. And it's like what we came out with in the end in very short order with very little collaboration is something that would have been very tough to do without this type of technology and the short time horizon that we had to actually pull that together. So yeah, so I think that generative AI, to answer the heart of your question, it could be a real game changer in differentiation and should be a tool that teachers look to when they're dealing with the base principles of differentiated instruction.
I love that. And we talk about teachers being the best prompt engineers because what do we do every day, all day, as we ask good questions? And
Yes.
so what we are doing with generative AI is we're asking good questions. In the same way that you learn how to frame a question for a student, in the same way we're going to ask you to think about framing your question to ChatGPT, which we call prompting. And it always blows everybody's mind that to understand that the most common uh like language right now for coding is essentially not common but most newest is English. Literally there is a system prompt that lives behind ChatGPT that says be polite, like don't say I don't know. Like, keep answering. If you're not sure the first time, try again. And it's not lines of code, it's not lines of text, I mean of numbers. What it is actually literally language. And you can see from the system prompt that they've actually iterated on that system prompt because you can kind of tell where they've improved it over time. And so, everyone in here today that's going to be working with us or watching it later, when we ask you to prompt with us, we're asking you to be computer scientists. But it doesn't mean that you have to understand everything about this technology. But it does mean that if you learn how to ask a good prompt, how to frame it, how to essentially give it a direction, you are going to actually see a better output. And so I think this is where it gets really exciting, where the work that Brian and I have done on these prompts will get you much closer to where you want to be. And so that's a starting place, but you're going to be the creative engine. You're going to know your students best. You're going to be able to identify the areas in which you can personalize this instruction much better than we can. So we're just giving you the step up. But that as Brian said, that curiosity, that creativity, that empirical like approach, that a comfort with failure. Sometimes failure is really funny. I mean, and honestly, like sometimes when ChatGPT messes up, it's actually the most fun I've had in a while because it's so silly. But so I think that like when we think about this, like when you think about differentiation, what do you think the technology can do really well right now, and what do you think it doesn't do as well?
I think right now it's really good at getting to the specifics of a given problem that you're trying to solve. So I need to get something translated. I need an idea for advanced topics or remedial topics on this certain set of objectives that I'm dealing with. I think the other thing that it does really well is scalability. Okay, because when you look at when you look at what artificial intelligence really does, it recognizes patterns, it recognizes relationships and structures at a scale it'd be really tough for a human to look at 5 million slides and say, okay, that's cancerous cell. These cells probably aren't cancerous. So I think getting to points where you have problem sets, we have specific types of problems, and you're able to say, okay, this works for one audience that I'm differentiating for. Now I can make a couple of small changes in a follow-up prompt and do it for all my audiences. So I think the scalability aspect is something that is really powerful, but just its ability to articulate back in language and give you the format you're looking for, whether it's a haiku or whether you're looking for a song lyric or an outline. And now I have it building all kinds of complex tables with different formatting for different types of internal deliverables that we're pulling together. So it's really good at that. So it's good at the details and it's really good at scalability. What it's not really good at is, this is all still in its infancy. It's so powerful that I think sometimes we take it for granted. We're dealing with an infant essentially in terms of a mature technology. And when you're working with things like DALL-E, which I have the paid version for GPT-4, it can be very frustrating because it's one thing to give something a sentence and get a sentence back. It could be one of countless number of responses that would make sense. But when you give it a prompt for an image, you're thinking about something very specific, and you start seeing where your language maybe lacks a little bit, or you don't know quite how to ask for something visually the same way you would when you expect, from a language-based response. So I think that, Amanda, the different modalities that you'll be able to output to, because there's already some tools that do things like videos. I use it all the time when before I shoot a video, it creates a running shot list. So I say, okay, I'm going to teach new Python programmers how to build this type of module with Django or Flask. And it will do the video, and it'll have the running list and the images on the right-hand side. With very little editing, I can output that, pulled in my prompt software, and have an instructor shoot a video. So that part is awesome now, but I think when it gets to the point where it can create 3D objects quite easily, it can stub out videos, it can have different audio tracks that you can swap in and out to have different languages with all your videos. I think all that stuff's coming next, and that's going to be exciting. So there's also that bridge in between. Okay, you get what you want in your prompt and you're really excited. Then, as we were also talking before we came online, was then you've got to do all the formatting. So I think having some better tools, some better, more intuitive output capabilities without having to be heavily prescriptive will be something I think will add a lot of utility to generative
Absolutely.
AI moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that the chat interface can be a problem. Like it's not necessarily always the easiest, as you said, to get the output that you really want to see. But I think that there are really just great opportunities to the thing I get most excited about is I think that one of the use cases it does really, really well, which we're going to show, is this idea of leveling text or leveling questions or leveling explanations for like high skill, medium skill, emerging skill, right? And so I think that that's something that's really, really great. And we know that makes a huge difference because if you give students an explanation, a description, an instruction within their zone of proximal development, you're going to see them succeed much, much faster. And they're going to find challenge in a way that's meaningful for them and not discouraging. So that's something it does really, really well. And so we're going to see that today. But like as we go forward, we're going to probably see more and more tools that are able to do that at a click of a button. And then the thing that makes it magic is not that it's just, a different description, but it's actually the first prompt we're going to show you in a moment is we can make it in the student's interest. We
Yeah.
can make it in their zone of engagement. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but if it isn't, I just made it up. So zone of proximal development and zone of engagement. Like what is a kid most interested in doing or learning about? Like that could be really great. Or what's the most culturally responsive way to do this? Because you just said like we have a very complex, very diverse, beautiful makeup of our country and countries that are here today. And to be able to meet those students where they are, both in the terms of their skill but engagement, I think is really exciting. But on the other end, yesterday I was actually doing a webinar, not webinar, but a training with a tribal college in Bismarck, South Dakota. And so these are instructors that are working with the Lakota Nation, and some of them are Lakota, some of them are not. And what was really interesting is that when they were really trying, like some of the teachers, instructors were thinking about how do I create more culturally specific content for their students. And it was really interesting because while it could write a response in Lakota, when it was asked to create a specific activity with a Lakota connection, it used incredible cultural biases. In fact, the first one was about totems, which don't exist in the Lakota history. And the second one was around sacred rights, which we definitely don't want to talk about in a Python coding question, which is not appropriate.
Mhm.
But it was like the instructor was really trying hard to be more culturally appropriate, but he was not Lakota, but someone else was. And they were able to very, very supportively say, this actually doesn't, this is very culturally inappropriate or a lack of specificity. It's using these general stereotypes, which we know are a major issue with these generative AI tools. And so it does require, I think, as we think about real deep differentiation that is culturally appropriate, we do have to be very, very cognizant and very careful that we are not exacerbating existing biases and or creating new ones, or new stereotypes. So I think that, as we talk about in every webinar and everything I do, it's always about the balance. And as you said, this technology is a baby. It is learning to crawl. It's like kind of like a spaceship baby, like it's like a space alien baby. So we don't really exactly know what crawling means right now, because sometimes it's crawling and sometimes it's running and sometimes it's skipping, like, and it kind of does it in a really weird pattern, but it is still very new and we need to be critical users of this technology. So everyone, if you are not on ChatGPT already, take out your phone, get on the web, whatever you need to do, pull up ChatGPT. We're going to use the free version like we always do. And so Brian's going to do our first show and tell of the day with one of the amazing prompts that he put together for us.
Okay, let me get my screen shared here. I have too many screens open. Those of you who are on Zoom all the time can probably empathize with it.
Relating right now. Can you make it slightly better? Let's make it like 3 times
Okay,
bigger if we can.
okay. I've got a huge monitor here and I'm trying to,
There we go.
that better?
Maybe just one. Yeah, that's one more.
Okay, one more. Okay.
Perfect. There we go. Yep.
Great. Well, one of the things that I think is almost forgotten, which is a shame, is the ability to just personalize content, which it was such a big part of differentiation. And I know for years I was in e-learning, and we're always talking about new tools that were coming out that would allow you to customize, create personalized learning paths, create all this amazing branching, turn your content into Bandersnatch, where you could go through and see different outcomes and get different remediation. And the technology has really fallen short on that, in my opinion, thus far. Or there have been standards and technology in place that were just simply too complicated for a practitioner to be able to go in and achieve that level of personalization. So with this prompt, we're going to take a very simple sample prompt, and we're going to looking at high level of genetics. So I'm just going to copy the prompt here. And I'm going to go to ChatGPT. I'm in 3.5, which again is the free version. I'm going to post this prompt in.
Do
And
you want to
notice,
just go through, like, why don't you just go through the structure of the prompt first, and then we can kind of
oh,
walk through the outputs.
okay, I think it pasted the wrong one anyways. I think that's what happened. So, okay, here we go. I don't know why it pasted another one there. Okay, so a little bit,
Technology.
do you want me to share that one slide of the hierarchy, or you just want me to talk through it?
I think we just talk through it would be great.
Okay, so one of the things, with a prompt, there's all these great, and we have a number of this too, a number of really simple one-liner prompts that you copy and paste and you reuse as is. But one of the things I think is really useful early on in using ChatGPT is start thinking about your prompts in a very modular ways. So you're setting yourself up for reuse of the prompt from the very first draft that you're creating it. So you want to think about what is it you're trying to generate? What personas do you want to use? What products do you want to have on the back end? And then if you start thinking about that in modular ways, you can very easily take something you've created for one domain, like maybe you're teaching about Nietzsche, and there's some concept in there that's really complex that may be too complicated for a philosophy 101, but maybe not for a graduate course, in Nietzsche. But you can take that same prompt and change a few things out and have it do something very similar in a complex topic such as quantum physics, which is something maybe we'll look at here in a couple of prompts. But here we have a prompt, and the prompt is, you're an expert ID with expertise in building personalized, target, high quality content. You have some question stems down here, and you want to take the personal interest in Japanese anime and take the concepts that are presented here in these question stems and come out with some questions related to that. Okay. So the other thing that I can do quite quickly is I can go back to the prompt. I can edit this prompt, and I'm going to change this to from Japanese anime to NBA players. Okay, so I'm going to save and submit. Okay, and then again, it goes back to my question stems I have here, for example, on twins, biological concepts of nature versus nurture, and then family culture, what role do those things play? And I can go back and I can edit this one more time, and I'm going to change the interest to young adult novels. Okay, so here we have this for the young adult novels, and I have a follow-up prompt for this that I have, and I want to go in and create a quiz with question stems and a question key. So I have this prompt that I'm pasting in, and it says, now take each of the examples you generated above and convert each bulleted example into a multiple choice question with 4 options, the correct option being in bold. Okay. So
It did not want to give you bold.
it didn't want to give me bold. It's giving me bold every time, but didn't want to give me bold this time around. But that's just a quick and dirty example of how you can take a topic, you're pulling together a pop quiz. You may have different interest groups of students, different personal interest in the classroom. There may be something fun coming out, a movie coming out. There may be any number of things that are coming that may tie into personal interest that allow you to very quickly take some very generic question stems, such as these here, and contextualize them around a personal interest area rather quickly and generate one quiz, it could be, or you could create, again, going back to the scalability capability, you could create 5 or 6 different quizzes, all on the same subjects, all covering the same learning objectives, but with a different level of contextualization based on the personal interest of the students in your classroom.
That's great. And I don't know if you like the little bit of the someone's been using this a while. I don't know if everyone knows that you can change a prompt and keep regenerating. And that's a great way to like kind of not have to cut and paste or ask again, use the same structure. And so the fact that that happened, it was really great with and so what I would say though, just as if we kept going, and even though it didn't give us the bold, it didn't follow it directly, we can ask it now, please identify an answer key. So I can go and say, create an answer key for this. There we go. And so even though sometimes it doesn't act like we talked about that space child that sometimes works exactly like we want and sometimes doesn't, this is an example of how to keep rolling. And so a lot of that magic happens after that first prompt. And so when you ask a question, someone asks a question about hallucinations, there's really not a beautiful like benchmark for this, but it's somewhere probably between the latest benchmarks say around 3 to 5% for ChatGPT, the both versions, and more with the with Claude, and then even more with Bard. But now Bard has changed to Gemini, so we don't actually know. But we know that it hallucinates around some things, like sometimes it'll forget a piece, it'll drop it, sometimes it'll make up a fact or a figure. It can't word count. It's bad at mnemonic devices. It's not very good at complex math. So there are a lot of areas in which we want to avoid kind of trusting these tools. And so, but it's a great question. So do you mind if I do one now, Brian, if
Yeah,
that's
go
okay?
ahead, jump in.
Um, so that's a great question. Who should the attribution go to, and how do you know it's correct? So there are other tools we can look at maybe at the end, like Perplexity, which is more generative search. It would not give you this level of like amazing, output in terms of these questions and these interests, but it can give you, an indication of the source and sources. There was just announced today, I don't know if you saw this, Brian, but there's a relationship now between ChatGPT and OpenAI and Axel Springer, like Springer databases. And so we will start to see for the first time sources for some of the work that's
Oh,
done, some of
wow.
the outputs, which will be very similar to what you see on Bing, and more and more on Bard. So I would say we're getting better, Tim. It's not quite there yet, but it is getting better. So I'm actually going to get to do some live prompt engineering with you guys. I have to get involved too. And so we're going to do, this is one of the ones that I worked with Brian on, which is simplifying concepts and differentiating using AI. And so we know that like one of the most like we talked about it, one of the best ways to differentiate is just giving students the right level of content for what they need. And that could be a reading, but we often don't even get to level of like, what about descriptions or explanations or questions themselves? Like this is where we can get even deeper. And this is really exciting. So if you look at the original prompt, and I'll make this slightly bigger so everyone can see it, if I can get there we go. Here, you're an expert instructional designer. We always prime it. The way I've been talking about this, Brian, lately is like ChatGPT is trained on the internet. It is an enormous model and it could do so many things, but it's like taking a sledgehammer to a needle.
Yeah.
So what's happening is you have this sledgehammer and I'm answering this needle question. What could happen is I could actually like break the needle. Like it doesn't really work that way. So the more I cut down the context of what I want it to do and give it context and direction, it means that I get down to maybe like a ball peen hammer, like a small hammer, and I can actually work on it better. And so when we do this, we always start with that framing and we are specific as possible. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this example prompt and I'm going to go over to ChatGPT, my buddy. Let's see where we are. And oh, wait, we don't do that. So ChatGPT, you'll notice I used it a lot today because I did 3 hours of presentations for Avon School District. Shout out Avon, you guys were great. And also did the training on these two where I tested them out as I was doing it. So today I'm going to open that new context window. Remember, it's going to remember our conversation up to a certain point in this context window. I always like starting a new one. I'm going to enter it in here. And what we see is that, your 10th grade English teacher, and we're talking about satire for Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal. And I'm going to put this in. And what I've asked it to do is actually give me 3 levels of explanation of satire within this novel. So it's identified, you can see though, I'm being very specific, label each explanation with the corresponding skill level. And what I have now is I have beginner introductory, so I have intermediate, and I have advanced. And so you can see that the level of conversation gets longer, more robust. You see more examples, and you get to see more complex vocabulary. And so we see that happening pretty easily. And if I do what we just looked at with Brian, is I can go and I can say now I want to do it with a different book. So I'm actually going to do it now with what's a good 10th grade book? Maybe let's do East of Eden by Steinbeck.
Good choice. Good choice.
I was a really weird kid, everybody, probably unsurprising, but I was also an autodidact. So I read a lot and I was left to my own devices. In my 8th grade, this is a lot of information, but my 8th grade book report, I did, oh gosh, what's the famous Steinbeck book?
Massiman.
No, the other, Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath. And I wrote this whole thing, including like about the last scene, which is not very appropriate for an 8th grader if you've read it. And I scared the living crap out of my English teacher. She was like, I don't even know how to grade this. It is not appropriate for the student to do.
That's
So
awesome.
I was a weird kid. But anyway, so what we see here again is we have new satire, a basic introduction, we've got intermediate and advanced. And what you're actually going to notice is that it's actually not nearly as robust because satire is not as big of an issue or a construction, a literary construct within grapes within East of Eden. So you can see that it's already tailoring that to the type of, like the type of literary construct, the book itself, and also giving you leveled explanations. And so as you can keep going, because we always want you to keep going, as you can do things like create assignments. So I can do this now where I'm actually going to take an assignment. I'm actually going to do this one I'm going to have it create an assignment. And I'm going to go back though, create an assignment for each on the suggestions for a modest proposal because it's more appropriate. And now what I've got is now 3 different assignments based on the 3 different explanations. And so what you'll see is you have a 300-word short essay, you've got a longer essay that has more more purposes or more components, and then you have a much more robust final essay. And so you can see, as we can see, and maybe I would say essays are really hard right now because chatbots can do them. So maybe we don't do an essay. So I'm going to say, create an assignment that is not an essay. So let's see what they come up with. And so now I go into a satirical infographic, like how fun. And so it didn't give it to me level because I wasn't specific to that. But here's an example of where we're starting to look at different ways and models of doing this work. And a pretty easy, like this is 3 minutes, and it was able to do a pretty good differentiation based on level, but also 2 books where one satire is a big part of and one where it's not. So it's a good example. So we're going to go to our next prompt. Do you want to show the next one?
Yeah, sure. And while I'm bringing this up, having worked with a lot of teachers and a lot of instructors in training settings, we wind up spending a lot of time, especially in the technical space, looking at students who need remedial help. So if we're teaching a cloud computing workshop or a DevOps workshop, perhaps we have students that don't know enough Linux commands, right? But I can tell you, once we started rolling this out in Anger, and again, the plasticity of these prompts is you're creating something for remedial students. It's a great opportunity and point in time to do the same thing for the advanced students and vice versa. So I think having tools like this where it's so rapid and so easily to make minor modifications to your prompt to reach out to another audience is something you should always be aware of, and that kind of modular plastic type mental model for building prompts. But this last one that I wanted to share is creating a virtual science tutor and AI chatbot. I believe we have another one in here as well that's for a language tutor. So one of the really cool things that people may not see when they first started using ChatGPT and using prompts is you can create intelligent tutors. And it is a very powerful thing to do. It's very good for personalized learning and individual. And we want to take this example of working with building a tutor for teach students quantum computing. And in this particular instance, these students, they've already had Newtonian physics, so they need a gentle introduction and transition into thinking more like a quantum physicist by working with this intelligent tutor. Okay, so some key aspects of this is you're an expert physics tutor. As Amanda pointed out, this has been trained on everything. So there's almost every imaginable persona that you can pull together. So that's really important for building the context. You're tutoring me, and I'm an advanced high school AP physics student. I'd like you to help me learn the core concepts of quantum physics by comparing this to Newtonian physics. Act like a human tutor, start asking me basic questions. Scale up. This last part's really important. The scale complexity and subsequent questions up or down per the accuracy and completeness of the responses in this context window. When I fail to respond to one of your questions accurately or completely, please provide detailed and supportive feedback. So you can see right away that you could use this same kind of form and construct and go in and swap out some of the tokenized things like the student persona and the subject matter expert and the product they need to create, et cetera, to very rapidly reuse this. Okay, so it starts off here. How would you describe the fundamental differences between classical and Newtonian physics? And I could say something like the nature of waves and state. Okay, and it'll go think about that and provide a response. Whoops. It's part of the fun of working live is the failures. Okay, so it looks like you mentioned some key aspects. Let's explore this a bit further. Additionally, when you mention state, are you referring to the concept of quantum states, blah, blah, blah. And I can say, yes, I was referring explicitly to superposition.
And I love that this is what Brian is demoing because I do not know enough about this topic to even be tutored in this manner. Because this is what's great about this is it's coming from a level of students' existing understanding. And so for me, probably not where I would start, but like I think that this is such a great example of like meeting a student where they were. And we actually got a question from Hi Ho Lu about this idea of like students maybe feeling like less or better or like less than because we're giving them a more simplified explanation or a different explanation. And something that we do want to get away from, we definitely don't want to reinforce the kind of blue team or Robin or, you know,
Yeah.
the different kind of leveling that happened in the past. And so it's on the path towards something more like what just Brian showed us, which is really meeting the student where they are. And even though ChatGPT is not going to be ideal for that yet, it is where I think we're going as a lot of companies. Sorry, I said your name on Hi How. Sorry, I said your name, but thank you for telling me how to say it because I hope you're here again and ask another question. And so, but the idea that like intelligent tutoring is more and more what we're focusing on in the
Yes.
ed tech world. And so while I do know though, and I know this for a fact because we did a panel on Monday where we had two students talking about how they used AI. Both of them used it for high level tutoring, one for multivariable calculus, which maybe shouldn't have, maybe ChatGPT 3.5 isn't great for that, but another student used it for economics. And so students are using this to help them study, to reinforce, to meet them where they are more and more. And I think that we have to recognize that as a very common use case.
Yeah. I think too, Amanda, I want to point out, yeah, I've worked with remediation systems for teachers in the state of Georgia who did not score well on differentiated instruction. And we found one of the obstacles was the fact that they had to give different assignments to different students. And the parents would say, well, hey, Joey's doing a different assignment than Billy, you know, next door here. So the ability to explain differentiated instruction and the ability to understand, like I was crushed when I was in Glee Club. I was in fifth grade because I got pushed to the blackbirds. I knew the blackbirds were the people that couldn't sing, right? I knew that. I live with that till this day. It still makes me sad. But I think, you know, that's why too, when you're looking at these prompts is to have a 360 is like, okay, I'm looking at this audience. Okay. And I think that's a great place to start with the prompt is looking at addressing a specific issue for a given audience and then continue to look around the room at your different audiences because that's what it's all about, right? Is understanding you have different fountains of knowledge, you have different fountains of life experience and culture and all these different things. And you may be seeing something that's really visible on the surface that I can go grab this, but that's a great opportunity to say, okay, I've focused in on this. What's in the periphery? What's adjacent to this? What are some other groups that I may not be thinking about? What are some other individuals in my classroom I may not be thinking about? And how can I start playing with that within my prompt empirical session sooner rather than later in the development of that prompt?
Absolutely. And I think that also sometimes it's about choice as well. Like, you know, like how are you on this? Are you emerging with your knowledge? Do you feel really confident? Do you like what level of challenge? And then you work with students around metacognition and self-reflection where you're not letting them kind of stay in the Blackbird. Because you know what? A lot of people can move out of Blackbird, right? Because they do training and
Yep. Yep.
maybe they take it a different way. Is that also giving students voice and agency where you start taking away the stigma of having different levels of like meeting you where you are because the most important thing is not being like everybody else but being the best version of yourself, the best version, the person that's most supported to improve, because that's going to really get us. And that's what the zone of proximal development is all about, which is that idea of it's really being meeting you where you are and giving you like an equity play instead of an equality play. And I think that this is
Yeah.
where, but it does require, you know, desegmentation. It requires very thoughtfulness. It requires us not putting kids into like buckets that they can never leave, right? And so we want these to always be like, so one student might need an emerging piece for quantum physics like me, but then not need it for Jonathan Swift. Like, and that I like, and I'm moving at the rate in which I need to. And again, these tools like ChatGPT are very early stage. They're not going to be the interface of the future. The interface of the future will be really, really different
Yeah.
It's just that right now we could actually start doing some of this stuff without having to wait for that new interface. And so last prompt for today, which is the one in which is we talked about already cultural pieces. Sorry, those are my text messages, so let's not do that. uh, Friend is a PhD student and is about to go home. So let's go to my go back to here we go. There we go. Resume share. And so culturally contextualized activities or culturally responsive activities. And so what we have here is like we tend to teach a very like not only do we tend to teach a very global north inspired curriculum and about ourselves, but we also our chatbots are also very global north. So I saw some people from Malaysia and Thailand. It's going to be quite different. And so what we want to do here is like we actually see, and you'll see that there's that like a formatting piece as well of actually the way we formatted the prompt where there's some space and some real strong like signals as to it's two different tasks. But what we wanted to do is actually create essentially, let's see, going to ChatGPT, new context window. I'm going to drop this in. I'm going to make sure everyone can see it. But, we're talking about Independence Day for the US. And we want to look at students. And if you're from these places, let us know if there's some bias in this, or stereotypes. But the first task is about creating 2 to 3 paragraphs on similar Independence Day events for these non-US countries, and then a social activity. And then what I've put here at the bottom is be careful not to use cultural stereotypes in your answer. And if you're not sure about a student's culture, do not create a response for that culture. And the reason why I did this is that there is research that shows that was just released by Anthropic. If you tell ChatGPT or Claude not to be biased, it will be less biased. And if you tell it's okay to not have an answer, it will avoid answers that are potentially fraught or not good. So what we have here is we have the first task, we have Thailand, we have Australia, we've got Mexico, Guatemala. And I will say I lived in Australia. And so Australia Day is actually not considered to be, it's reconciliation is the other term for it, which is like this idea that Australia Day was actually about the decimation of the indigenous peoples. And the fact that it identifies this in the bottom, it's a day of efforts towards reconciliation, is a good example that it has some textual knowledge. And then also here we have the task. So we're going to go into the different components and we're going to start to think about what this looks like. So go into pairs or small groups and then think about what this looks like within your culture. And I think that that's a great way to do this, right? Because what we've done is I'm using like my knowledge, right? And I would double check this. And again, make sure, and we've already signaled to the bot not to reinforce stereotypes or biases, but we want to make sure that this is something that our students feel comfortable as well. So what we did is that because we believe in AI literacy being not just for you all, but for students, is that actually one of the takeaways is have students evaluate the outputs to see if there is bias or a lack of cultural understanding and have that be a rich discussion in your classroom. And so these are opportunities, like we're not going into this saying, hey, this is perfect, right? But we're saying is that this is something that can get us sparked and thinking and may actually carry with it extensive biases. So let's have a conversation about these technologies. But you can keep going. And the fact that in one prompt, you did essentially 4 different explanations and a full task with one prompt is a great example of how with structure, Brian talked about the modularization of the prompt, you can actually get to really targeted, really nice outcomes that are pretty complex with very little effort, so to speak. So we're going to come off share. So we know that we always try to end at 45 if you have to head off, and considering it's the middle of the night for some of our audience. We're going to drop so Brian's LinkedIn and my LinkedIn in the chat, because that's one of the best ways to interact with us. But we're going to take some questions. So if you have any questions about differentiation, we have 3 more prompts that we didn't do. One was a language tutor. One was, what was the other 2? One was
Can't remember.
so many. One was a language tutor. One was, hold on, we'll get to 2. The language tutor, we have an instruction translator for ENL students, and you can I think, yeah, and then a language practice partner. So there were 2. So language is a really big part that we didn't talk a lot about, but languages, like we have language tutor and language partner, and sorry, language translator and a language partner. We know that like conversational like AI, which is what a chatbot is designed to have a conversation with you. And at least with some of the very core common languages, like Spanish, sometimes French, others, that they do a really good job in that conversation. So if you have any questions, let me know. But I'm going to ask the first question because you were talking about formatting earlier, Brian. So how can you take an output like this and put it into a slide? Is there a trick or a hack to do that? Is it possible?
I'm a sadist, so I've taken to doing all the formatting myself. But there are tools. I think one of them is called Writable or Writability, and a couple other tools that allow you to paste the output as markup into this tool, and then you can copy it out of that tool with formatting that carries over to Word. And I think it's really ironic how powerful this tool is. And I spend the majority of my time with formatting. Getting the prompt, getting the content is not a problem, but getting it to look the way that I need to sometimes can be. So I think there'll be a bevy of tools in 2024 and things built into Word and PowerPoint and built into your browser that will allow you to convert that markup. That's a big one.
Yeah, and so if you want to look at so Gamma, Almanac, or Curapod have these essentially you can create slides. They all use ChatGPT API and other APIs from other chatbot tools. They're all right now getting better, like everything. They're going to have issues, especially around image generation, but that's kind of the way to do it. Right now, like the 80/20 weirdly is maybe like 95/5, and that other 15% is formatting. Like
Yes,
it's getting
yes.
into the right format, making it work, but that will get better and better as we see these tools natively in the productivity suite, like Microsoft Copilot, which hopefully will get significantly less expensive over time. It'll be something we just use as part of our kind of daily lives. So it looks like we don't have any other questions. I just want to say, like, it's so amazing to have like so much like deep knowledge. Like, I love that Brian comes from, he's at Coding Dojo. He's talking about quantum physics and Linux, but it's all about being an educator. It's all about thinking through the way we prompt and the way we meet our students' need, regardless of the level they're in. So I just want to say thank you so much, Brian, for your wisdom, your effort, the new prompts, and your time today and your
My pleasure.
friendship along the way. So we just really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And then, of course, like everyone that is here, I'm so glad that you're here. We love working with you guys, and I hope to see you next at our next webinar. Please go to bed if it's the middle of the night, or have an amazing day in Australia, or have a good night. We love having you. Enjoy everyone here. So have a great night. And if I don't see you before the end of the year, have a great holiday season. Thanks, everybody.